God's partial color vision, his
Ooh, that was quick.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Tuesday night Artists and Arts Organizations call. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Stephanie Chi, the Director of the Center for the Arts at NJCU. And we have our partners, the Jersey City Office of Cultural Affairs. Christine Goodman is here.
Hi.
And Heather Werfer-Sandler from the Jersey City Arts Council. I'm going to turn it over to Christine to make some announcements, and then we have a full slate this evening of guests. So, Christine?
Sure. I just wanted to say that the Office of Cultural Affairs, as with the rest of the city, is slowly moving back into operation. We have about 25% of our workforce back now. So as we move forward through the summer season, if you have questions about programming, if there's anything you want to work through, if there's anything we can troubleshoot together, feel free to drop me an email, cgoodman@jcnj.org, and or any of the contacts you have on my staff, and we'll be able to address any of those concerns.
And Heather?
Hey, everybody. Just one quick announcement from the Arts Council. We will be opening up, nominations for the 2020 Jersey City Arts Awards in the first couple of weeks of June. So we'll be sharing information here, but we would love for you to spread that nomination form far and wide. And last week we had a great meeting with Christine and Mayor Fulop, talking about the arts, both in this short-term crisis and also looking at long-term strategies. So we invited Mayor Fulop to join us tonight. He's going to make just a couple of announcements before we get into our other guests. So I'll turn it over to you, Mayor Fulop.
Okay. Am I unmuted? Does that work?
You are. We hear you.
All right. Terrific. So first, let me say, Heather, and to the Arts Council, thanks for having me. And I know this is not the format that any of us choose to be meeting in, but nevertheless, I'm appreciative for the opportunity. So I figured I'll touch on two things. I'll touch on kind of where we are on the referendum conversation, and I'll share a little bit of perspective from at least my side on the political and the governmental side. And then I'll speak a little bit about kind of the relief fund and some of the conversations that we've had and where we stand on that. And so I'll start on the referendum, and the first thing I'll say is that we are open to feedback, and we'll take directions from this respective group on how you want us to proceed in November. We worked for 2 years on getting this to where it is today, hand in hand with the Arts Council and our administration, and figuring out a mechanism to fund the arts long term, similar to the way we do parks. And it's unfortunate that we're literally on the goal line in a favorable circumstance and under normal conditions. And we have to kind of think about whether it's the best time now as a result of the pandemic to move forward. My personal feelings are that the risk is very, very high to move forward and not be successful. If we're going to put this on the ballot, whether it's this year or next year, we have to make sure that it is successful, because otherwise it'll be a referendum and a reflection on how the city views the arts community, which I don't believe would be accurate. So we put it on this November. The risk of a added tax in an environment that's very, very tough for people with unemployment and rental challenges could be tough to get it passed. And I'm fearful of what the impact would be if it goes down overwhelmingly. And so initially we were going to table it till next year. That the Arts Council reached out and said that they had concerns around that and they wanted more time. They weren't necessarily saying that was a good idea or a bad idea, They just wanted to, consider that up until the latest possible opportunity that we had, and that would be around August. And we said, we're happy to work with you, and we won't take any action till then. I do feel that every day that we don't have a definitive direction, it hurts our chances to be successful, because if this is going to be successful, it really relies on the networks that each of us have, myself, but each of you respectively, to communicate to those people about the importance of having a long-term sustainable funding mechanism for arts communities here in Jersey City. So I guess we'll reconvene closer to August. We worked with our legal department, and the one thing that I can commit to, because I know there's apprehension around this, is that if the decision of this community, the Arts Council and the arts community in Jersey City, is to wait another year, we will make sure that it is on the referendum the same time that we table it. So what do I mean by that? Is that we'll have the opportunity at the same council meeting to delay the referendum and clearly stipulate the fact that it'll be on next November, because the ordinance and the law does allow us to do that. So I know people had concerns that maybe once it gets tabled, we'd never want to revisit it. I know that's not true. I mean, I've worked for 2 years with the Arts Council on this, but even though people are concerned about it, and if it makes them feel comfortable that they'll know with certainty that it will be on next year, we're going to do that at the same meeting if that's the direction that we go. So that's a little bit about the referendum. Heather, anything additional before I move on to the relief fund?
No, I think that covers kind of what we talked about, and we've been in touch with many of you, and the Arts Council is always available via email if you have suggestions and concerns. Yeah.
Okay, so let me talk a little bit about the relief fund, and we listened to the concerns and the feedback that were given to us. When we met last week, the Arts Council asked for $150,000 approximately to be allocated towards the arts, was their direct ask, and the Arts Council wanted to see how that can be given. So what we decided to do with the relief fund, and I'll speak to all the different tranches of that, but first I'll speak specifically to the arts component, is that we're going to make a commitment of $250,000 to arts organizations. So, and that's this community that we're talking to right now, to be very, very clear. And within that, there'll be $100,000 that will work directly with the Arts Council on, which will be direct grants to artists within Jersey City. And then there's going to be $150,000 that we're going to dedicate towards programming proposals from the arts community. And we're going to be predisposed towards youth-oriented proposals or projects that are broader in scope for the community, but we'll set up a system where people could submit proposals, and there'll be a committee that allocates dollars for that. And so the total will be $250,000. If you are a for-profit arts organization, so that really covers the nonprofit and the individual artist side. If you are a for-profit organization, you could still pursue those same dollars that I just touched on, but there's also dollars allocated slightly more, probably about $300 to $350 that are going to be allocated towards small businesses. And you could also pursue those dollars as well if you're a for-profit on the relief fund. So there's a lot of opportunities that are going to be meaningful. And I think that what we're doing speaks to our commitment to this community. We think that we need to find long-term ways to support it. And we're doing our best to reach beyond just what the ask was, to show our commitment that we mean what we say, that we want to be supportive of the arts community. So we're going to work closely with the Arts Council on direct grants, and we're going to have dollars allocated towards programming. And hopefully that helps bridge the gap between some of the people that are struggling over the last couple of months to get them to kind of, a more stable territory. Okay?
Great. So does anyone have any, we do have 2 other guests, but any just responses or comments you can type in the chat, or do a raise hand. We'll just spend a couple of more minutes on this.
Oh, I see Sam has his hand raised. I'm not surprised. Sam. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Steve. How are you doing? Good to see you. Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope that you and your family are doing well under the circumstances.
You too.
Thank you. Yeah, so, well, thank you very much. Really appreciate yours and the city's support of the arts under the current drastic circumstances that everyone is dealing with. We really appreciate it. I know a number of us are really asking, questions about how we will be able to survive and bridge between now and hopefully sometime next year when things start opening up again. My question is regarding the arts funding available for programming. Do you have an idea? Is that for use in programming over the next 3 months, 6 months, year? Could you give an idea?
Yeah, so we are going to focus on really the next couple months. So we're not looking to spread that out long term. We're looking to put that money to work immediately. The gap that the city has, and the reason that I said that we're focused on kind of youth programming and particularly around the arts where possible, is because it seems that most cities are going in the direction of limited to no summer programs for kids. Camps aren't operating. There's limited things that we could do with the rec department. And I think where there's an opportunity there to have some of the organizations that are familiar with youth programming, like Nimbus, no question about that, to help us get through the next 3 or 4 months. So of all the money that we've raised, we're not looking to hold on to any of it for any meaningful amount of time. We're looking to put it to work immediately in the community.
Thank you.
Okay. And again, this is kind of direction that we're going. It's all moving fast. So if you have changes or big picture feedback that you want to provide us, just give it to Heather or the Arts Council and they'll communicate that to us. Heather, I think, are you muted, Heather?
It's like I've never Zoomed before. Just to clarify that the programming, is it restricted to just youth programming, or you're saying those will just be prioritized?
Those will be prioritized.
Okay.
Those will be prioritized. And then the $100,000 is going to be with the Arts Council, and that'll be more direct to artists, and we'll take direction from the Arts Council on that.
Great. So yeah, again, the Arts Council email, if you don't know it, Jersey City Arts Council @gmail. I want to thank Mayor Fulop for taking time to join us. And you can email us questions or suggestions. We're in ongoing conversation. And we want to now turn it over to Dr. Henderson from NJCU.
Thank you very much, Heather. I really appreciate that. And I want to thank the mayor for coming and most importantly for his really strong support for the arts. He's just been really phenomenal, and there's a really lively arts community in Jersey City, whether it's Sam Pot, Jersey City Theater, all the exhibits that we have. We really need to grow that, and I just want to thank him for doing that. And whatever we can do at NJCU to help, let us know, because Stephanie is there. That's her job, is to serve the community and helping us kind of get the arts incorporated into the community. So again, thank you very much, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our guest speaker tonight, who is Ennis Carter. Ennis, I'll unmute you before I forget. From Social Impact Studios. I'll let her tell you a little bit about herself, and just having a conversation about messaging for the arts, which is going to be something that's important in both the short and long term. So Ennis.
Great. Thank you so much. It's wonderful to be here with you. I love being in arts communities. Any time of day. So I'm really appreciate being invited here. So I am Ennis Carter. I'm the director of Social Impact Studios in Philadelphia. We're a national creative hub for engaging people in social issues and culture. And we work on a lot of different campaigns and public awareness and awareness raising, but also policy and behavior change and just advocacy for arts and other social programs. So you may know some of the things that we've worked on. We are the creative partner on the Arts Ed Now campaign in New Jersey that is all around the state, and national initiatives like the Buy Fresh, Buy Local campaign for farmers markets, and we created the Meatless Monday campaign out of Johns Hopkins. So I've been talking to folks in Jersey City, Meredith and Heather, for the past couple weeks, just to check in about communication and messaging around arts, the importance of arts during this time, but for always, and also how that connects to advocacy even during these challenging times. So what I thought I could do tonight is talk a little bit broadly about public awareness and stories and messaging around arts and arts advocacy, and then also go into a little bit about a ballot initiative is a different kind of animal than public awareness, just raising education and awareness raising. So I thought I could talk about what's evergreen between any kind of public facing communication and initiative, no matter what you're trying to promote, but also what makes a ballot initiative something that's very specific and has some different ingredients that are pretty key to keep in mind. And so that comes from 35 years ago when I was an organizer in New Jersey. So I was an environmental and voter registration organizer in the 80s and 90s, and I worked as a campus organizer on the Newark campus for New Jersey PIRG many years ago, before starting Social Impact Studios in '96. So I think what I wanted to do tonight was also share some resources. Meredith has been participating in a weekly communications support Zoom that I host from my living room here in Philadelphia. And I wanted to go over some of those things, share some resources with you that you can get online on our website, but also invite any of you to join in that weekly communication support Zoom tomorrow morning. So I'm going to share my screen. Okay, I think that'll work. Uh-oh, you're going to have to allow something for screen sharing. You might need to make me a host or something. So while we're figuring out that technology, what I wanted to talk about was, the idea of public-facing messaging, and that there are just some basic things that are always going to be true no matter what's going on. And actually, I would argue that now more than ever, we need to be really looking at what makes good messaging and consistent information, communication exchange around the issues that are most important in our daily lives and for our communities. And the first one is really becoming very palpable during this time, which is clarity. So very often in our world of communications, up until this whole pandemic hit, I think we were just hearing a louder and louder landscape of all sorts of different messages and different voices, which is great. That is part of our democracy. That's part of communication. And we're living in an age where we're just constantly bombarded with messaging from all different walks of life and all different perspectives. So the good news is that in our culture, we're actually pretty good at deciphering what's genuine and clear and what is just kind of marketing BS. And that being clear and being consistent with the vision is always hands down the most important part of any kind of messaging. And the arts and culture already has embedded in it a value system, a belief in a vision of what makes quality of life, what is valuable in human expression, what brings people together, what gives people a platform for their voices, that these are these are the things that are true about the arts, and that is going to be the number one thing that needs to get through no matter what's going on. And you all are people who are not just temporarily advocating for something on a ballot initiative. You live and breathe the arts as a sector, as part of your community. And so you have to be the champions. You have to be the advocates for that. And you are all the time in your work and what you do. And never more than when communication is feeling uncertain, or when things are feeling, when everything is feeling uncertain, but different levels of value are being brought up because there's some really dire things happening. So that's one thing that I think is really important, is just the clarity of whatever it is that you are advocating for, and what brought you together to have the arts in Jersey City and why they're important to life. That hasn't changed. And so that needs to really come through in any messaging or any promotion you're doing to keep going. Just as a little sidebar, the reality of our time, this has been a really strange time, obviously, but the reality of such an incredibly dire situation is that we're either open or we're not. And if we are still continuing to do our work, then we are doing our work. And we need to be communicating about that work as part of the stewardship of that work. And in many ways, this moment in time, communication is the only way that we're actually delivering our mission. We aren't out there, doing productions. We don't have live exhibits happening. It's through communication channels that we are able to fulfill the missions that each of our organizations or our own as artists have. So I just want to remind folks that that's really, like, right now, communication is important more than anything. And so not communicating about something is basically being closed in this moment. The other thing that is evergreen, no matter if it's a public awareness initiative or if it's a ballot initiative, is value. So people support things that they value and that they think are worth the effort, or in this case, the money, and both. So that's always been the case for arts. We're always having to promote the value of it. And we do that through story. We do that through self-expression. We do that through showing how it actually affects other parts of the society, not just the arts themselves as a value in and of themselves, but how that value, how there's a ripple effect of value. So no matter what's happening, if you're trying to keep arts alive and keep the message of that alive, connecting to the value of your audience. And when you're talking about a whole city and you're talking about specifically about a ballot initiative, whether it's this year or next year, you need to be talking to everybody, not just the people who are already the supporters. And that's where the value part can really bridge audiences and people who may not necessarily attend the arts or pay for the arts or support the arts, that they might have other values that are impacted by the arts. And that's your job as the advocates to bring that forward. The third truism of raising awareness and keeping a message out there is word of mouth is still the number one way that people get information around. Essentially, social media is a word of mouth device. Even though we think of it as technology, it's trusted sources telling each other what they value, what they think is important, and helping to actually call to action what people should be doing by their opinions, by introducing each other to things. So that word of mouth is going to translate all the time in your work for messaging for the arts, but specifically if you are doing a referendum, the grassroots component of word of mouth becomes very important, and leadership and kind of change makers and opinion makers within small clusters is really how that word of mouth gets transmitted. And that's the same. That's just, it doesn't matter whether you're running a huge initiative or a small one, that's always going to be the core of where you need to have your story percolating. So I wanted to maybe, am I able to share my screen? No, not yet.
What
I think
the error saying?
It's saying host disabled attendee screen sharing. So I think I have to be a host in order to.
You're a co-host.
You're a co-host.
Oh. Odd. There we go. All righty. So before I did want to spend a little bit of time just talking about the specific differences between public awareness communication and a ballot initiative. And I've worked on many ballot initiatives. And so all those things I was mentioning are true and key for either of those. And I want to share some tools with you and give you some information about how you can continue to benefit from any of the tools we have or our communication support. And then I wanted to just talk a little bit about the differences of a referendum ballot initiative. But if you go to our website, Social Impact Studios, the first feature is about our weekly communication support Zooms. And we were going to be doing them through June, but I think I'm going to extend them through the summer. And they're totally free, and they're Wednesday mornings at 10 o'clock. And we pick a theme, and for an hour, we have a group where we do some best practices around communications, and then we open it up for discussion about either that practice or what people are dealing with. They're doing a fundraiser, they had to cancel their gala, or they had to put it online, and how to communicate differently about it. So there are a lot of different topics, and I wanted to highlight a few of them that have some specific tools. But there are a couple of overarching things that I think we've been discussing each week, and I wanted to share with you. The first is that, especially at the beginning, people were hesitant to be communicating and definitely hesitant to do any kind of call to action or any kind of ask. And I just want to encourage you to, first of all, think about the stewardship that you have for the arts, not just your own connection to it, but that you as a community, 42 people showing up on a Zoom at 7 o'clock at night shows commitment, even though we're all stuck in our houses and we've been Zooming all the time. That may even show more commitment. Like, who wants to do another Zoom at 7 o'clock at night? So that shows a lot of commitment. And so I want to encourage you to think of communicating and specifically asking, calling people to action as not something that is inappropriate, but actually a demonstration of hope during this time. That you have a vision that is going to be true, hopefully, no matter what happens, because we all know that the arts will get us, and everybody's been getting through this time through the arts. They've been watching, they've been listening, they've been maybe picking up some art form that they didn't do since they were 7 or something. So we know that it's here. We know it's part of this experience. And because we're also sensitive, artistic people, we may be holding back because we feel that it is a difficult time to talk about something like the arts. But the arts are what get people through these times, but the arts are also how people make sense of these times. So by encouraging people to stay connected and to think about what's coming next is our role as artists, as visionary people who can imagine the better time. So I want to just say that and make sure that you're remembering that the audience that hears about the arts needs that. And they need you to talk about it in a way that's genuine and sensitive, but they do need you to be talking about your issue. So there's a whole list of topics that we've been covering each week, and you can explore these and connect in. But they range from being like full articles with a lot of tips on, what you should be doing, what you can be doing, what are the core takeaways like keeping things simple and clear, but also connected to your values and your unique purpose. I am finding that first of all, there's a lot of lengthy emails. So there's a lot of like content coming in our emails, and we're all getting so many emails that it might be better for you to use this as your opportunity to do that blog post that you haven't done, or that you've been not sure how to make content, but to make simple, short messaging that takes people somewhere else, into your website, onto your blog, onto a video, because there's just too much going on for people to really know where to go, and you have to curate that information. We also, on this article, we have like these key takeaways. And one of the key takeaways, I think, for this whole thing is it's okay to express uncertainty. Very often as leaders, we're worried about seeming like we don't know what we're talking about if we express uncertainty, or that we are, because we don't know what's going to happen, we can't tell people yet. And we all know this personally. There's nothing worse than like no communication. We'd much rather hear that we're working it out. We're trying to figure it out. We know this right now. We don't know anything else, but we know this. That is so much better than not hearing anything at all, especially in one-on-one communication. So expressing uncertainty is fine. It just has to be aligned with your mission. You need to connect the dot directly to the work that you're doing. And it's a great reminder of why you're doing what you're doing. Having to like make sure that you explain that again, because everybody's got a lot going on. They aren't necessarily in your brain understanding exactly what you're talking about. So these moments are great moments for you to connect the dots to the mission of your organization, or to the vision of your art, or your art form. There's many, many ways to do that. So I wanted to show you that inside these articles, there are a lot of planning tools also for being able to take the guesswork out of your messaging and your communication. And one of them is, let me just get there. Excuse me. The Action Plan Clarity tool, and all of these tools are available for you. They're Google Docs, and they're great ways to just take a minute and document some key information about whatever it is that you're trying to message and communicate. So, for example, the 4 things that an audience always really wants to know is, what's your purpose of communicating? Like, why are you talking to me? What's your current focus? What's the long-term vision? And what's your urgent, immediate need? And if you know the answers to those 4 questions, you pretty much have everything you need to know for your messaging. What's your purpose? What's the current priority? What's the long-term vision? And what's the immediate need? Because different people respond to different parts of that equation. You'll cover all the bases if you just know those 4 things. And then if you want to really get into it, you can take extra steps to plan out, your communication and your promotion around these shifts that you're making to go online. If you're taking your programming online and you need to suddenly pivot your promotion, you can use a tool like the promotion planning tool to think about what your audience needs, what the message is, how you're going to deliver it. These are basic design principles, which is take a minute to plan your communication, because it's going to be so much more effective and so much more powerful. And then there's a bunch of different ones, but another one that came up that when Heather and I were talking was the idea of removing barriers to fearless communication and action. So you're in the middle of life right now. We're all in the middle of trying to navigate this, but you're also in the middle of how your organizations or how your work is going to connect and what it means to what the arts mean now, how do people experience it, all of that's changing. So that is really giving us an ungrounded, unmoored kind of feeling. And it's easy to get not so much like scared, fearful, but it's easy to see how people aren't like boldly and fearlessly communicating something. Because there are so many details and so many things going on. So there's two things that I just wanted to share about that. One is that you are so close to it that you will always know way more details than anybody needs to hear in your messaging. So remember that. Like, remember what it's like to hear information from a different sector. Like, when you listen to NASA communications about weather balloons or something, remember that you can't possibly understand every detail and that you need them to make sense of things. And so part of it is that it's really easy to get over fears, I find, when I'm trying to help somebody understand something as opposed to just pushing out a message. So if I really think of it as helping you understand, I have no fear. I could, jump into something that might even be a fundraising appeal. And it's because I'm trying to help you understand and navigate it. And then the second kind of tip or trick that I use is remember that you're an advocate for something bigger and that you're not actually talking about yourself or even your own job. You're talking about an idea. And an idea, there's no reason that we should be fearful about still sharing ideas. Because if we're in a situation where we can't still share ideas in whatever form, then we've really lost hope. And we're not there. And we need to be okay with sharing communication, but in an authentic way. So I do want to kind of end and go into questioning by saying that none of this is about elevator pitches or Shark Tank or any of the things that people often think of when they think of messaging something. It's about real, authentic communication about what you believe in and what you're trying to accomplish. So the last thing I just wanted to share before going into questions was that the difference between public awareness raising and a ballot initiative really boils down to organizing and numbers, honestly. It's awareness and understanding of who is in support of what you're promoting and what you're advocating. And it's about that word of mouth translating into strong local leadership, like literally block by block local leadership that is engaging at a level that word of mouth is very personalized. That's what's different. Like, you can get a buzz going about something, about a show, about a new space, about some kind of restaurant. You can get a buzz going in a lot of different ways. But to get a ballot initiative, to get a referendum passed with whatever numbers you need individuals like talking to their circles and saying, I want you to vote for this. You need to vote for this, and this is why. And then the last part of that is actual tracking, polling and tracking. And that can be very elaborate, but it can also just be command central, like knowing who is where and what is happening within your constituents is not something that can be done with guesswork. It's real numbers, it's real responses. And even in today's world, all elections, like even Gallup poll is kind of like, we don't know. People take polls in weird ways and they kind of, there's a lot of meta levels. So the one-on-one is still going to be the best way to know what's happening. And that's really the difference between a win and not winning on a ballot initiative, is knowing and being able to spread that word of mouth, but in a one-on-one level. All right. So like I said, you can go to the website, you can go to this main article, which is called Weekly Communication Support for Challenging Times. And all of these articles have links to all of these tools in them. All righty. So I'm happy to talk about ideas or answer questions or share more of the specific tools.
Thanks, Dennis. Can you unshare your screen so we can all see everyone? Perfect. And then I think if anyone has a question or comment, you can raise your hand in the chat. And that can be, you know, we obviously are all trying to come together for this messaging around the referendum, but I hope some of this information is also useful to individual organizations and groups and programs that you're doing. So both kinds of questions are welcome.
I think Beth had a question, Beth Cope.
Great.
Hi, and Ines, thank you so much for your expertise. It's really much appreciated. I had a question that once our messaging is figured out, do you know, since you've done ballot measures, do you know of foundations right now who are funding coalitions like ours to do voter file matches so that we can match our databases with the voter file system, so we know exactly who supports our organization and supports the arts, actually makes the effort to go and vote every and often and in a ballot measure, because we know lots of times there's a drop off in a ballot measure. So that's my foundations who would like to fund that. I'd be really curious to know.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that I was looking at with Jersey City specifically was also just turnout. You know, the percentage during a general, you know, presidential election, like 62%, and then every other year it's been like 22%. So it's a substantial drop off. So knowing each person and knowing districts and block by block and precincts and things like that is really super important. I think that I don't know of specific funders because I'm not in the political realm. I'm more in the, like, how do you connect to the public? So I did want to touch on the idea before you even finish your messaging, making sure that that's tested and that you engage the public in that process, because you are also engaging them in the initiative by asking their opinion about the messaging, not just the question, but like, how do we talk about this? Being okay to do that is something that a lot of funders would fund. I think the Dodge Foundation especially is what comes to mind around the like specific idea of community engagement and equity around the issues of equity. So I would be looking at the funders that are looking at community engagement, at equity. And, you know, also I think during these times, the real leadership level funders like the Ford Foundation, I would even check out what they've got going on. What they're doing is telling people that they trust them to spend the money the way they need to. They're not doing these like, you know, no gen op, and, you know, they're not controlling these discretionary funds in ways that they used to. So I would say go for the big ones, just because the other thing that I think is really key for this kind of funding support is the message that you may be all leaping over because you've been working on this for so long, is that this is a totally innovative, and you know this, but you may not be talking about it like this with funders, is that this approach is totally groundbreaking. The idea of a public initiative, you know, property tax money being used to support the arts as a sustainable thing. We are very familiar with land trust initiatives. We're very familiar with historical trust initiatives. That you all are doing this at a different level that actually supports individual working artists is totally groundbreaking. So I would look at CERDNA. I would look at other places that really support working artists, like the Mellon Foundation. But even more importantly, just remember that what you're talking about is not the mechanics of a ballot initiative. You're talking about a groundbreaking leveraging of a mechanical thing to save the world.
Exactly. So well put. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments for Ennis?
I saw, you know what I'm going to do? I saw a question about the resources. While people are thinking about that, I'm just going to grab some links and put them in the chat for how to get to the tools while we're, but it's going to take me a sec so I can answer questions while I'm looking stuff up.
Okay, I'll just read one from the chat here. Are there any case studies of best in class art advocacy campaigns that you can point us to that have arisen in response to the times?
You know, what's really interesting is that the word advocacy has taken so many twists and turns in my career and for many people that have been doing this work, you know, as long or longer, that advocacy used to mean only about policy. And it used to mean lobbying. And because of all of the challenges with political restrictions and then fundraising, advocacy became more of a broad-based way of talking about just people, ambassadors, like people supporting something and being vocal champions of it. So I think that I know of a lot of initiatives around arts education in particular that are advocacy oriented, which is really about the champion part. So obviously Arts Ed Now in New Jersey, but there's California. So I would say do some searching on arts education advocacy, because they have really good, like the Arts Ed, you know, Americans for the Arts has that like annual like Arts Education Week. There's a lot of tools that could be maybe purposed for what you're doing to engage people in storytelling and also direct advocacy. I think that the other corollary are more in the area of like social justice work. So there's an organization that we just help them redo their whole identity called Media Justice. And I would encourage you to look at their platform and their tools. They also use a thing called Phone to Action, which is a tool to, like, through texting and through direct outreach, that they have figured out really cool ways to leverage that to advocate for racial justice. But I think it's applicable. I think you could be talking about, I just think all of these communication tools, which are designed to, you know, push business, we can be leveraging those to push like a democratic agenda or a arts agenda or a cultural agenda.
Great. There's a question here in the chat. Ennis, can you give us advice on how to structure our efforts around the referendum? What do you think are first steps? And just that's from Meredith, and just tying into that, you know, if we do end up with this extra time and decide to put this on the 2021 ballot, do you think that like starting with a public awareness messaging and then moving it into the ballot initiative would be a good strategy, or other first steps that you recommend?
Yes, and I mean, I think that from a public facing strategy, it's definitely not too early. You should start now, like when we get off the Zoom, and like have a strategy for, and you can use these promotional planning tools, like what is the current message around the arts and the future? I mean, I think obviously it's about, I mean, I don't know, you need to brainstorm this. I'm going to give you a tool for creative brief, and you need to think about what the current message is about the value of the arts. And you cannot think about it as if everybody already gets it. You need to be explicit about the value of the arts, not in a way that's like elite or top down. You need to like call people to feel that thing that is, that they feel when they see their kid at a recital or whatever it is. I mean, we can make all sorts of connections. I mean, I'm not a sports person, but when I watch the Olympics, I'm like crying and I'm like, yay, humans, So that same thing, we in the arts community are so touched by what we do that we presume everybody like is walking around touched like that all the time. So we had to be really explicit. All of that you need to figure out now. And it's not about raising awareness for the sustainability of the arts. It's about illuminating the ever-present value that the arts already have in Jersey City, right? And I think you also need to get super serious about what it's going to take to win. So I think you need to know your numbers. Like, do you know how many votes you need to win? Is it a 51% plus? If only 22% show up, what does that mean? Like, you need to know those numbers. And that's not public facing. You're not going to go out there and poll everybody tomorrow. Like, would you vote on this? That's you getting ready for the fall. And then I do think that even if the initiative is not until next year, the fall is the time. This fall is the moment where people are thinking about democracy, about what our role is in deciding what we get and how our money is spent. So you can't miss that opportunity to connect the dot between the value of the arts and what will be coming in the future in the next wave. Next year, if the initiative isn't on the ballot until next year, during an election season, you need to be there at the table with people who are talking about the role of government, the role of tax money, the role, like how things are spent in a way that is very positive.
Great. I think Sam has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you. I love that thought there about taking advantage of this moment in history. I think that there's a lot to build on in spite of the devastation. And given the announcement from the mayor that we just heard about the city's commitment to the arts, which as far as I'm concerned is unprecedented in Jersey City. There's never been a direct grant of that scale from the city to the arts. And so actually I do have a question, but on that note, I do want to give a quick shout out to Christine Goodman for being the advocate for the arts in city government, and also to Heather Warfel and the Jersey City Arts Council for all your work, all your volunteer work in sticking with this conversation. We really appreciate it. So thank you, and everybody who's been a part of it, because it's been a long time coming.
Thank you, Sam.
Cool. But my question, I'm wondering for Enos is, sorry, is it Enos or Enos? Sorry,
it's like tennis without a T.
Enos, okay. So is there a precedent? I mean, I'm just thinking, one of the issues that we run into in the arts is that we just get into these silos where we have our mailing lists, which, are somewhat dependable. But it's a relatively small amount of the total number of people that are going to be coming out and voting. And, we all care passionately about the arts, but for the most part in Jersey City, people don't particularly come out to see arts events, or at least they don't come out to ours all that much, not as much as we wish. So I'm wondering, however, there are many, because Hudson County is such a political environment, there are many political lists of people who have all this voter information, very highly stratified and collated and all that. Is there a precedent for collaborating, partnering, or linking with, whether it's like the Democratic Party or specific political figures that may have a list that would be beneficial to us? I don't know if we're getting into kind of a political quid pro quo if we try to work directly with any of the political establishment.
Yeah, so there's two things that come to mind. Well, three. Your local ecosystem, your local political ecosystem is going to be different than any other. So you need to be talking to the people that know it the best, and that it's it's about organizing across sectors. That's always the case. So the experience that I have with ballot initiatives was more in the area of the environment. So it wasn't for arts, but it was for, very extreme, for some people, environmental protections. So the other part that came to mind was really making sure that of all the people here, you definitely have connections outside of the arts circles. So you have your own lists, and that's great, but you can't just be talking to the choir. You have to be one-on-one talking to people who are in other sectors. And everybody here, there's 40-something people here, 37 people, they have at least 5 connections that are totally outside of the arts and are gonna not even be people who support that. And that's, you can buy lists, you can coordinate with different parties, like you can, find an arts lover who's in the Democratic Party and an arts lover is in the Republican Party, and then you can start to figure out strategy. You can buy lists, and then really, ultimately, I think you need to be growing what I would call the power map, which is busting out of the sector that you're used to talking to and figuring out where those constituents are, and even like Chamber of Commerce and other places that have constituencies, not just political mailing lists. Because I'll tell you another thing that's going to happen this fall, and this is not a surprise, and I'm not the only person that's going to say this. Everybody's going to be sick and tired of the political system after this fall's election. So you don't want to necessarily game that system to get your thing so you can be, running with the political people only in that same way. You want to use the genuine spread of the value, because that is going to have a more long last, that you're going to be able to track that too. This fall, if you don't have this until next fall, there's so much time between now and then that it's just going to be you're not going to know anything up and down. It's going to be up and down, up and down. And then you're going to have a whole populace that, depending on what happens with COVID this next winter, next year, schools, all the other things, there's just going to be a lot of weariness around election stuff. And so you want to get a jump on that by not only talking about this in a political election way, but in a way that's about self-determination for your city. And again, I'm not a political consultant, so there may be people who could tell you, oh yeah, there's a list. You just go there and you just get this list from the county clerk or something. That you may want to do, but I want to encourage you to not rely on the machine, on the political machine, because that's not what's going to win you.
Thanks, Ennis. We are getting to 8 o'clock, but this has been an amazing conversation. I also want to mention that after these calls from the past few weeks, the Arts Council did put together a committee, and some of who here are on, to kind of just in between these meetings to really hone in and strategize about messaging. So this information is going to be really useful to that committee, and please email the Arts Council if you have any follow-up thoughts on this. Stephanie, do you want to close?
I just want to thank everyone for their commitment to be here each week and continue the conversation. It's really important, and thank you.
I just realized I've been only sending stuff to Rachel, so I just put all of our links in the chat.
That's okay. We'll leave it up for 1 minute so we can do it. And thank you so much, Ennis. It was really great.
Thank you.
And if you want information from the chat, you can email Heather because she has it each week.
Yeah, we're trying to share them on the website, but it does take us some time. So just be patient. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, and good luck, and keep up the good fight.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.